From real-life pirates to massive shipwrecks, today we look at the 13 worst cruise ship disasters. Number 13. Compared to many cruise ships, the MS Estonia was a fairly small vessel. At just a little over 15,500 tons with a maximum capacity of 2,000 passengers, the MS Estonia was also a ferry, capable of holding some 460 cars. On September 28, 1994, the Estonia was crossing the Baltic Sea on its way from Estonia to Sweden. It was carrying a total of 989 people, 803 of whom were passengers. Due to poor cargo distribution, the ship was listing slightly to starboard. This would prove a decisive factor in the ensuing disaster. Rough weather led to a large wave striking the bow doors. This continued to happen, and loud noises were heard by everyone aboard the vessel. It's not clear exactly what happened next, but the list worsened and the ship began to flood. Of those 989 souls aboard, only 138 were rescued, bringing the lives lost to 853. Number 12. Carnival Triumph. Not all cruise ships result in a loss of life or the sinking of the ship. Some just result in massive discomfort and inconvenience for everyone on board. For instance, on February 10th of 2013, a fire broke out in the engine room of the Carnival Triumph. The fire was automatically extinguished by the ship's fire control systems, but the resulting damage caused total loss of power and propulsion. This caused raw sewage to back up into the passenger areas and gave the whole affair the laughable title of Poop Cruise. The reality, however, was no laughing matter. The ship was stranded adrift more than 150 miles off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, and the ship was not docked till February 14th at about 9 p.m. Number 11. Seaborne Spirit. In addition to sinking and being stranded, another sad reality of life at sea is pirates. Especially in regions of the world around Somalia, this is somewhat a frequent occurrence. A prime example of this is the Seaborne Spirit, which was attacked by pirates who fired rocket-propelled grenades and machine guns at the ship in early November of 2005. The pirates attempted to board the vessel, presumably to steal and plunder the ship's contents, but were unable to catch up to the ship. Further attempts to hinder the pirates were made by some of those aboard the ship. For example, Michael Groves, who was the security officer aboard the Seaborne Spirit at the time of the incident, used a device called a long-range acoustic device to discourage the pirates. This device, known as LRAD, can do permanent damage from one's hearing from a distance of up to about 980 feet away. It's often used to discourage crowds of violent protesters as well as scare off wildlife. Groves said that usage of the device left him with permanent hearing damage, but ultimately any edge he was able to gain over the pirates was worthwhile. In the end, the Seaborne Spirit escaped the pirates with minimal damage. While no passengers were injured, one crew member was shot. Thankfully, he survived. Number 10. Celebrity Mercury. Cruise ships are a closed environment when they're out at sea. There's no way on or off the ship without drastic measures being taken, and all food and water is kept aboard the ship for the duration of the cruise. This sometimes causes small outbreaks of flu to spread throughout the ship, as is often the case in enclosed spaces filled with people. Aboard the Celebrity Mercury in 2010, several hundred members of the passengers and crew were stricken ill by a strange virus which had members of the Center for Disease Control baffled. It was eventually identified as norovirus, which is known for spreading quickly in confined spaces. The symptoms were similar to stomach flu, and although this was the largest outbreak, it was one of 15 such events which struck cruise ships that year. Number 9. Costa Concordia. Much like flight plans for airplanes, it is actually surprisingly important that ships stay to their scheduled routes when they go for a sail. This is especially true when it comes to cruise ships, which often cost hundreds of millions of dollars and hold thousands of people. On January 13th of 2012, the Costa Concordia deviated from its route, resulting in a collision with a submerged rock and the subsequent capsizing of the ship. Costa Concordia was the first of Carnival's Concordia-class ships and held a total of 4,252 people at the time of the disaster. The resulting incident cost the lives of 32 people and cost the Carnival Corporation more than $2 billion, more than 3 times the initial $612 million investment in the ship's construction. Incredibly, the captain of the Costa Concordia claimed that at the time of the incident, he was trying a so-called sail by salute, a maneuver in which a ship is brought extremely close to shore so that those aboard the ship can salute those on land and vice versa. While this practice is very old and still somewhat common, it's rare for the captain of a cruise ship to attempt it. Captain Shinito was brought up on manslaughter charges in the wake of the incident. and was found guilty of 32 counts. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison, though prosecutors had originally asked for a 26-year sentence. Number 8. SS Eastland. Shortly after the sinking of the Titanic, you'd think that extra precautions would be taken for similar vessels. While this is true, not all vessels were retrofitted in the wake of the disaster, and even those who were upgraded were not immune to disaster. Ironically, some of the ships which were upgraded in the wake of the Titanic suffered problems as a result. The SS Eastland was one such ship, which tipped over while at port in Chicago in 1915. The ship rolled completely over while 2,500 passengers and crew members were aboard. In the incident, more than 800 people died. Among these were 22 entire families who were completely wiped out. It's thought that retrofitting additional lifeboats to the vessel after the passing of the Seamen's Act of 1915, a law created as the result of the Titanic sinking, caused the SS Eastland to tip over while still docked. Number 7. Royal Pacific. You'd think that on the open ocean, it would be pretty difficult for two ships to run into each other. But like a couple of trucks on an open country road which manage to smack each other on the head, this kind of thing does happen on the ocean. The difference is that the wreckage is usually a lot worse and a lot more expensive. In August of 1992, the Royal Pacific collided with a fishing trawler while carrying a load of 530 passengers. 70 of these people were injured and another 30 died, some whose bodies were never recovered. The other passengers were able to evacuate themselves, but the lives lost are thought to be a direct result of the crew's choice to save themselves rather than assist the passengers. Number 6. Louis Majesty. There have been many films throughout the years which focus on the idea of so-called rogue waves striking a seafaring vessel. These waves seem to come out of nowhere and can be several stories tall, all while traveling at absurd speeds. This isn't just fiction, though. It's happened before. The Louis Majesty was hit by several rogue waves in March of 2010, resulting in the death of 2 people and the injury of several others. The vessel, which was out on a 12-day pleasure cruise on the Mediterranean, was struck by waves as high as 26 feet and traveling up to 60 miles per hour, driven by hurricane-force winds of similar speeds. The ship wasn't damaged and was able to finish its voyage after a short stay in Barcelona, but the harrowing incident speaks of the dangers of such waves. Number 5. Pacific Sun. When the ocean decides to toss around a massive cruise ship like it's a toy in a bathtub, you can only hold on for dear life and hope that you come out all right on the other side. This is what happened to those aboard the Pacific Sun in April of 2008, when violent ocean conditions and a large storm caused the ship to lurch and shake wildly. The swells of the ocean made the ship rise and fall more than 25 feet at a time, and winds over 50 knots, about 60 miles per hour, harrowed the ship. Passengers were thrown around, resulting in more than 40 injuries. These included badly broken bones and many bruises, and the interior of the vessel was badly damaged. Number 4. Star Princess. In another incident of fire aboard a cruise ship, the Star Princess managed to change building regulations for cruise ships. On March 23rd of 2006, a fire broke out in the passenger compartment amidships on the port side. The fire was caused by a passenger leaving a cigarette burning on the balcony. The balcony divide began to melt, and because of the fact that it was made from a petroleum-based plastic, it caught fire. The fire spread to about 150 cabins, causing damage to passengers' belongings and also extensive damage to the ship itself. As a result, the material used for the balconies, which had previously been approved by the International Cruise Safety Regulations, was banned from further use. Number 3. MTS Oceanos. It's crazy to think that people could simply not care about a cruise ship which cost many millions of dollars. The investment alone seems like it would be enough to warrant the ship being kept in tip-top shape. However, these vessels do age, and sometimes companies which are themselves trying to stay afloat neglect their fleet in favor of making a larger profit. This is what happened to the MTS Oceanos, whose owning company let the ship deteriorate to such a state that there were loose hull plates, valves which had been stripped for spare parts after a recent voyage, and a hole in the bulkhead. The result of all this was that in August of 1991, the MTS Oceanos set sail on its final voyage. During this cruise, the ship began to flood after an explosion in the engine room. With the power lost and massive leaks flooding the ship, the crew simply prepared to evacuate themselves, not bothering to warn the passengers. No alarm was raised and the passengers were left to fend for themselves. Luckily, an entertainer aboard the ship was able to radio for help, and 16 helicopters were able to rescue the passengers and crew. Number 2. RMS Titanic. Perhaps the most famous cruise ship disaster of all time was the sinking of the RMS Titanic, which took place in April of 1912. This disaster set the precedent for many ship safety rules and regulations, since the size of the casualty count was directly related to the almost complete lack of safety precautions taken by the crew of the ship. There weren't enough lifeboats for one thing, and the crew didn't go over evacuation procedures with the passengers before setting sail. When the ship struck an iceberg in the middle of the night, the ensuing chaos cost the lives of approximately 1,500 people. Number 1. Wilhelm Gustloff. A sad reality of war is that civilian and non-combatant lives are often lost in the pursuit of military victories. This was the case for the MV Wilhelm Gustloff, which was sunk on January 30, 1945 by Soviet forces. The resulting loss of life is still the largest ever in the sinking of a boat. More than 9,600 people died. Of these thousands, approximately 5,000 were children. 3 Soviet torpedoes struck the Wilhelm Gustloff, one hitting the engine room directly. The ship then began to list heavily to port, causing lifeboats on the starboard side to slam into the boat, breaking and spilling passengers who were trying to escape onto that side of the ship. The majority of lives lost in the incident were caused by the freezing Baltic waters. The air temperature that night was a low 0 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 18 degrees Celsius. Compared to many cruise ships, the MS Estonia was a fairly small vessel. At just a little over 15,500 tons with a maximum capacity of 2,000 passengers, the MS Estonia was also a ferry, capable of holding some 400 in distribution. The ship was listing slightly to starboard. This would prove a decisive factor in the ensuing disaster. Rough weather led to a large wave striking the bow doors. This continued to happen, and loud noises were heard by everyone aboard the vessel. It's not clear exactly what happened next, but the list worsened and the ship began to flood. Of those 989 souls aboard, only 138 were rescued, bringing the lives lost to 800. From real-life pirates to massive shipwrecks, today we look at the 13 worst cruise ship disasters. Number 13. 60 cars. On September 28, 1994, the Estonia was crossing the Baltic Sea on its way from Estonia to Sweden. It was carrying a total of 989 people, 803 of whom were passengers. Due to poor cargo